Told you so. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to a briefing about local food system legislative and budget priorities for the new legislative session. This is a briefing for stakeholders, so you are among many dozens of other advocates from around the food system in Massachusetts who are involved in or want to be involved in local food policy as the legislature considers bills and spending over the next couple of years. And so I'm going to start out with just a quick primer on the legislative process and then get into presentations from about 10 organizations that will talk about their priorities for the next year. So the legislative session is a 2-year session. It began, this current one began in January and will go through the end of 2024. There have been over 6,280 bills filed so far. That gives you a sense of the magnitude of paper or pixels that we're all wading through and reading all of these bills, and the legislators are reading through as well. And a lot of them, I would say well over 100, are directly related to food system issues. And in addition, there's lots of others that the food system should be considered in, and things like transportation planning, things around solar and climate. And so there's a lot to do and a lot to be aware of, and you're going to hear about a lot of those bills in the next hour. Both chambers of the legislature are still working on developing what's called their rules. This is basically what it sounds like. It's how they operate. Usually this is a pretty boring process. And last session, in fact, the two chambers never even came up with a consolidated, agreed upon set of rules that they were both going to follow on. And I wouldn't be mentioning this at all, except for that yesterday, the House Rules Committee passed their package of rules. And one of the things that's in the rules is what committees they're going to be. And it's pretty rare that there's changes. But those of you who know, the ENRA committee has been around for a long time, energy, natural resources, and agriculture. And the proposal from the House, which passed the House, is that there will be a new committee strictly about agriculture with energy and natural resources in their own committee. This is really exciting and still has to get through the Senate. But just the fact that that attention is being brought to agriculture to even consider the idea is really exciting and a testament to all the work that you all have done in elevating these issues in the legislature. Some key dates to keep in mind over the next, over this session for policy bills. The filing deadline was January 20th. Bills can be filed late, but most of the bills, the vast majority of bills, are filed before January 20th. The opportunity for co-sponsorship has been extended. It's always been longer in the Senate than in the House, but now it's no longer this 2-week rush in the House. Members of both chambers have until bills have their first decision made in committee. And so that gives us several months to work on this because hearings don't usually start in earnest until late spring or early summer. And so it gives us a little bit more time, which is exciting, a little bit more time to educate legislators about the bills that are important to us. Co-sponsorship is a really great opportunity to introduce yourself to legislators and make them aware of bills that you're interested in, encourage them to co-sponsor them early on. And you're going to hear from all of the advocates that are presenting today that part of what our ask of you today is to ask you to reach out to your legislators to co-sponsor these bills that you're going to hear about. A year from now is when bills must be reported out from their first committee in order to continue. And the formal session when bills can have to be decided by is July 31st of next year. And then the budget process, which I won't go into too much detail on, the key dates, this happens every year. It's not a 2-year cycle. The House budget debate tends to be at the end of April. Senate happens in May. Then there's a consolidated budget done by both chambers, and then the governor signs it by June 30th. So that's a very rough thumbnail sketch. I'll say the collaborative is available to do more in-depth trainings and webinars around advocacy and the process. And so if that's something you or your organization is interested in, please feel free to reach out to Becca or I. We'll put our email addresses in the chat. So with that, we're going to start out with going through a number of organizations that work on legislative advocacy to talk about their bills. And we're going to lead off with MLRI and Pat Baker.
Hi, everybody. This is great. Thank you so much, Winton, and the Mass Food Systems Collaborative for hosting this. And I know I have 5 minutes. I'm going to talk mainly about this bill, but I wanted to just let you know that Mass Law Reform Institute is a statewide poverty law center. We work in 8 different substantive areas of law: housing, immigration, healthcare, employment rights, food security, cash assistance, et cetera. So we cover a lot of poverty law areas. We are definitely working hard on and supporting a number of big campaigns. The Lift Our Kids campaign to increase cash assistance benefits to 50% of the poverty level, which it's incredible how low cash benefits are. The Hunger Free Campus campaign you'll hear about later with Greater Boston Food Bank and Food Bank of Western Mass. Universal School Meals with Project Bread, HIP benefits. We are supporting and promoting all of those campaigns you'll hear about. But I'm very excited to share with you a new campaign that we are working on with La Colaborativa, which is a Chelsea-based group that does an amazing work in the community and serving low-income immigrants in particular. We've launched the Feeding Our Neighbors Coalition to restore the basic benefits for Massachusetts immigrants. From 1997 to 2002, we had state-funded benefits for immigrants who were cut off of federal benefits under the 1996 welfare reform law. These are dreamers, victims of violence, people with humanitarian parole, but not enough time in parole status, or they're subject to a 5-year waiting period. So this is our campaign for both SNAP benefits for legally present immigrants, which includes people who are elderly, disabled, individuals with kids, and then cash for families with kids. The reason we're not doing cash assistance for individuals is that they are eligible for the EAEDC program, the State's General Assistance Program. 6 states do that. Senator Sal DiDomenico, you'll hear his name a few times today. He's our Senate champion. On the Senate side, Rep. Antonio Cabral led the charge in 1997 to get the state-funded benefits, and he's doing it again, partnering with new state rep from Chelsea, Judith Garcia. So that's the core campaign. I'll put it in the chat, how you can join the Feeding Our Neighbors Coalition. We're doing a big launch next week in Chelsea. We'll share more on that. But in my 2 minutes left, and I don't have a slide for this because Winton asked for one slide, I did want to raise a very important initiative happening right now, which is the governor's FY23 supplemental budget that was filed this week. It's House 47. As you may know, SNAP benefits during COVID have been boosted for families and individuals up to the maximum benefit, as well as $95 more if they are already at the maximum benefit. That's $90 million Massachusetts is receiving every month, $90 million in extra SNAP benefits. That is ending this month in February. The last payment people will receive is March 2nd, and that's it. And that will be a huge drop. I mean, we still have many families getting SNAP, but they will experience a huge drop at the checkout line. DTA is trying to reach out to them. But what the governor's supplemental budget does is it would give 3 more months of SNAP benefits as a glide path, 3 more months of boosted SNAP at 40% of the emergency allotments. So that's only $130 million for 3 months, but it would still give families a glide path. She's also included $65 million to extend universal school meals through the rest of the school year so that school districts can cover that, and money for skimming, which is the thieves stealing SNAP. So if there's one ask I have today beyond getting your state rep or senator to sign on to Feeding Our Neighbors Coalition bill and the other bills, is to reach out and get the governor's FY23 supplemental budget passed, and passed quickly. The schools need it so they can plan their meals. The families will need it as they experience the loss of the SNAP emergency allotments. So, and with that, I will end, but I wanted to just make that pitch while I have you. Thank you, Winton.
Thank you, Pat. And next up is Liron from Project Bread.
Hi, everyone. Great to be with you. I believe in making sure everyone's taking action, so I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat a action alert related to what I'm going to be talking about. Hopefully in the next 4 or so minutes, I'll convince you to take that action if you're on the fence, and I can post it again then. I'm Lee Romans. I'm an assistant director for state policy at Project Bread. We are a statewide anti-hunger organization focused heavily on the federal nutrition programs. We do have our food source hotline. It connects people immediately to a lot of great resources that I think many of you are working on in terms of emergency food and connecting people immediately. But we do try to focus a lot on SNAP, child nutrition programs, school meals, summer meals. And with that, our legislative priorities do reflect those types of programs. So we do focus on legislation that in some ways is expanding or improving on those existing federal nutrition programs, as well as many of the cash assistance type of programs that you'll be hearing from. So very much supporting what MLRI just brought up in campus hunger, HIP, and a lot of the cash assistance campaigns like the EITC campaign and Lift Kids Out of Deep Poverty. But what I really want to talk to you about today is our campaign for School Meals for All. Pat touched upon it, and I really appreciate that support from her and so many people here today. So we lead the Feed Kids Coalition. It launched in late 2020 and for the last legislative session. And during last legislative session, we were able to secure a 1-year extension of School Meals for All. Previous to that, for 2 school years, the federal government was covering that expense as part of some pandemic-related relief. And we saw just how great it is. A lot of us advocates knew it was going to be great to be able to take those barriers of shame and stigma away from school meals. And we were pushing the state to continue that policy. Our ultimate goal is to make that permanent. That way schools can really plan and know what's coming and be able to make sure that they're making the most of this program. In terms of the overall food system, that's really important because a lot of the decisions around staffing and purchasing happen quite early. It happens in like now, February, March, April of the school year. So waiting for the annual budget process, waiting until June or July is great, but not good enough to really maximize the benefits of this program. So that's our ultimate goal. But I have 3 pieces here that are all part of that goal. The first is what Pat mentioned. There is a supplemental request for more funding for this school year. Our budget last year was $110 million. That was based on thinking about somewhere around 45 to 50,000 more students would eat school lunch daily. And you'll see that number. We exceeded that on net for the state of closer to 56, 57,000 students. But in terms of the schools that were not previously providing universal school meals, we're actually seeing an increase of over 80,000. So that's where that expense is coming from. The program was just extremely successful in serving those students who previously were not eligible for free and reduced price meals despite having a need. So we need that additional money through the state government. And then we will be looking for another budget extension this year just to make sure that there's no gap while we seek passage of HD 766 and SD 1013. But then you'll see that last ask is let's pass that bill and make this permanent. We don't want to have to keep stringing schools along, not knowing if this is going to continue. We don't want families to have that uncertainty. We know this is working to improve access to school meals. And so we wanted to continue. The last little thing I'll say, I think I have about 30 seconds left, is that in terms of, I know some of us are anti-hunger advocates on this call, others might be thinking more food systems, and I'm so thrilled that we're all here together. This is a bill that helps support local food systems, school meals in schools, and you'll hear from Mass Farm to School, there's a lot of synergy there between schools and local farms, the local food economy. We were in Braintree celebrating this last October, and they were talking about how the additional revenue and additional participation they had, they were able to buy more baked goods from a bakery in Andover, as just one example. So we know that as we invest in school meals, there's a lot of secondary benefits in terms of helping improve quality and helping purchasing of local products. So obviously, from my point of view, it's about feeding the kids, and I'm sure for most of you as well. But we really hope you help us get this across the finish line for any number of reasons. Thank you. And I'll put that action alert back in the chat because we'd love for people to jump in and take action.
Thanks, Liron. Next up is the Greater Boston Food Bank. Kate Adams.
Thanks, Winton. Kate Adams with the Greater Boston Food Bank. Nice to be here with you all to share our priorities. I do have a very texty slide for you all. I apologize. So many awesome initiatives going on. But to lay the land for GVFB, we're the largest hunger relief organization in New England, serving about 70% of the state's food insecure population. And we distribute food to nearly 600 emergency food providers in counties from the North Shore all the way down to the Cape and Islands. And we're currently serving more than twice as many people as we did before the pandemic. So we're really seeing that persistent need. And the agencies we work with receive about 80% of the food that they distribute directly from us, most of which at no cost. So in terms of our state level policy and advocacy, our legislative and budget priorities reflect not only meeting the immediate needs of people through food banking, but also looking at the root causes. So a primary advocacy focus for us is MFAP, the Massachusetts Emergency Food Assistance Program. This is state funding to the food banks here in Massachusetts, specifically for the purchase of food. And last year, MFAP purchasing supported 67 local producers. And we're trying to do more this year. It's a really amazing program that is supporting both ends of the food system. So our local farmers, producers, and those in need coming to our food pantries. And last year we asked for $30 million in the state budget, which we were grateful to receive and used right up. And this year we'll be asking for $41.5 million to account for, persistent costs. We're seeing about 20% increase in food pricing from 2 years ago. We're seeing a decline in fundraising, with the ending of the emergency SNAP allotments that Pat mentioned earlier. The governor's supplemental budget proposes some funding for SNAP benefits to go back to those who are losing them, but it won't cover all of what's lost. So we do anticipate a real growing need in the coming months, which is reflected in our MFAP ask. So we are also focused on passing college hunger legislation that we co-lead with MLRI and the Food Bank of Western Mass, the Hunger Free Campus Initiative, which provides a roadmap for the Department of Higher Education to allow 2- and 4-year public colleges and minority serving institutions to take several steps towards alleviating food insecurity on campus through things like SNAP outreach initiatives and meal swipe sharing programs, coordination with emergency food providers, all strategies that have been proven to be successful. So this is the second legislative session for that, filed by Senator Lovely, Rep. Barkas, and Rep. Dom. So we're very excited, actively seeking co-sponsors. So we do have a robust coalition. So please do reach out if you're interested in enjoying the cause. We are also huge supporters of universal school meals and the Healthy Incentives Program, promoting food literacy, and the establishing basic needs assistance for immigrant residents that Pat just mentioned as well. We're also supporting a number of cash assistance and tax credit reform bills listed here, looking at those root causes. So that's all from me, and I think now I'll turn it over to the Food Bank of Western Mass.
Yes, indeed.
Kate, and thanks, Winton, for having us here. I'm Laura Sylvester. I'm the Public Policy Manager at the Food Bank of Western Mass. And you'll see there's a lot of overlap on our slides with everybody else here. The anti-hunger orgs in Massachusetts, we work really closely together, and we are great partners. The Food Bank of Western Mass is one of 4 food banks in the state, along with Greater Boston Food Bank. There's the Worcester County Food Bank and Merrimack Valley Food Bank. Our food bank in Western Mass covers the 4 westernmost counties. We have right now 165 member agencies, and then we also distribute food directly through mobile food banks and brown bags for seniors. And we serve an average of about 93,245 people a month in the past year. So you heard Kate talk about the Hunger-Free Campus Initiative. We are definitely working really hard to get that passed this session. And as she mentioned, we have a really robust coalition. If anybody's interested in joining the coalition, we meet monthly. We actually have a meeting tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. So this is a really good time to jump on and just see if you're interested. And you can send Kate or myself an email, and we'll put our emails in the chat, and we'd be happy to have you join that coalition and try to get this legislation passed that would help to end hunger on Massachusetts campuses. I also want to talk about Regional Transit Authority Advancement Bill. I know Alexis Walls from MPHA is on this call, and she will probably mention this as well. But like Kate said, we work on looking at trying to solve the underlying causes of hunger. And lack of adequate transportation is a huge cause of hunger, especially in Western Mass. There are a lot of rural areas in Western Mass where there is no public transportation option at all. And the places where public transportation does exist, it's often inadequate. Buses don't run often enough, and there aren't enough routes. It's really hard to get from one county to another county. We're actually working on a really exciting GIS project with the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission that hopefully within the next few months, we're going to have real data to look at in Western Mass where the gaps are in transportation, and there'll be an interactive GIS map in which to do that. And I will be back in touch when there is more information on that. But the Regional Transit Authority Advancement Bill would make regional transit more accessible by increasing the funding floor for the regional transit authorities from 92 million to 150 million. So right now in Massachusetts, transportation funding, the majority of it goes to the MBTA, which covers about 1/5 of the state, and the rest of the state gets about 7% of the funding that has to, the funding has to be split up, and it's really sort of inequitable the way things are funded. The bill sponsors for this are Natalie Pillay in the House and Susan Moran in the Senate. And so we really hope that this gets passed, especially out in Western Mass. It would really help not just us, but everybody, South Coast, the Cape and Islands, central part of the state. We all need access to better transportation. So, and then we're also really excited about an act relative to food literacy, which I'm sure Winton will talk more about, lifting kids out of deep poverty. And then the initiative that Pat Baker just told us about, basic needs assistance for Massachusetts immigrant residents. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll put our emails in the chat and be in touch if you're interested in joining the Hunger-Free Campus Coalition.
Thanks, Laura. We are moving on next to Alexis from MPHA, but I understand she has breaking news, so I'm going to let her share. She's going to share her own screen, so I'll stop.
I am. Thank you so much, Winton and others, for being flexible. Can folks see my screen okay? Okay, awesome. Give me a quick moment. All right. So hi, as Winton mentioned, my name is Alexis Walls, and I work with the Massachusetts Public Health Association. For those who don't know, MPHA is a statewide nonprofit that does public health policy advocacy. And so we work on a range of issues upstream that impact health outcomes, including food, which we know is a huge social determinant of health. And so I just want to share about a couple of priorities that we have this session and for the fiscal year 24 budget. I will then pass it on to the next person. And so just to start, as you all can see on my screen here, I won't say much more about the RTA advancement bill because Laura and the Food Bank of Western Mass, who's a great advocate for this work on regional transit and transit equity, has done a great job talking about the issue, but I will just sort of reiterate that RTAs are a lifeline to people in over 250 communities beyond the reach of the MBTA, especially older adults, people with low income, and folks with disabilities. And it is really this chronic underinvestment that Laura mentioned in RTAs that has led to a very significant inequity in our statewide transportation system. And so we are really pushing hard for this bill. This is a refiled bill. We filed it for the first time last session, and it was reported favorably out of the Joint Committee on Transportation, but didn't make it to the floor. And we're really hoping that we can see this pass this session, because as Laura mentioned, there are 55% of people in the state of Massachusetts who live in an RTA service area, and yet less than 7% of state transit operational dollars go towards RTAs. And so we really do think this is a huge issue and one that often serves as a barrier to healthy, affordable food access. And so the bill number is on the slide, as well as the legislators who are supporting it. And I believe I put my information in the chat if you're interested in getting more engaged in that. We're trying to get co-sponsors right now. The other more explicit food items that I want to share are items that we're actually pushing for in the fiscal year 24 budget. So the first is the Mass Food Trust Program, which is a healthy food financing program that provides grants and business assistance and loans in order to increase healthy, affordable food access in low-income communities. The program has funded over 48 projects across 10 counties in Massachusetts and has created more than 678 jobs and increased access to healthy food for over 225,000 people. And additionally, because of the public-private partnership model that the program utilizes, it's been able to leverage more than $11 million in project investment. And so this fiscal year, we're advocating for level funding for the program, which is $300,000. And we are working with some champions to identify a vehicle to get a new bond authorization for the Mass Food Trust Program. So we just want to make sure that that's on folks' radar. And then the last piece is Mass in Motion, which some of you might know. It's a DPH program that funds communities and regions across the state to address root causes of preventable chronic conditions. And they do this through cross-sector collaborations that create opportunity for physical activity and healthy, affordable food access. And so we are advocating to protect funding for this program, but we are also actually advocating for an increase in this line item for DPH so that they can fund additional programs that address the root causes of social determinants of health. And so those are the items that I just want to share with you all. And I will just share my email information in the chat for anyone who's interested in getting more info.
Thank you, Alexis. Next up is Mass Farm to School.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. I'm Simca Horowitz, co-director at Massachusetts Farm to School. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the priorities of a coalition that we co-facilitate with Food Corps Massachusetts. It's called the Massachusetts Food for Massachusetts Kids Coalition. Have on here some of the real goals behind this coalition. It's not aligned with only one piece of legislation. Really looking to maximize equitable access to meals at school for all students, strengthening those meals, so really maximizing the use of locally grown and produced foods in the meals, and ensuring that they have culturally connected recipes. And offering engaging food education to all students. So one of the priority pieces of legislation for this year, the thing that we're really taking a lead on is an act establishing farm to school grants. So this is SD 605 and HD 350, introduced by Senator Comerford and Representative Pignatelli. This is pretty similar to a bill that was filed in the last session. And what this does is establish a permanent grant program within the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education that provides funds directly to schools and also to early education and care programs to support them starting up or expanding farm to school activities. So it can support infrastructure investments, things like kitchen equipment for more scratch cooking, installation of garden beds. It can support staff training, be that school nutrition staff or educators. We were fortunate in the last session to advocate for establishment of a pilot program with COVID relief funds. Just got word today actually from DESE. The first round of applications for that program closed on Tuesday, and they were overwhelmed by the number of applicants and the dollar requests. So we know there's really strong demand from schools and early care centers for these funds. This bill will help make that pilot program permanent. So that's a primary focus this year. We do have an action alert on the MA Food for MA Kids website. I'll drop that into the chat. And we also will be working this session with Rep. Dom on another piece of legislation that would let me pull up the bill number, which is HD 3870, enact supporting farm and school partnerships and school meals. So this is really something that's under development, but looking at ways to strengthen and promote and really incentivize deeper partnerships between farms and school meal programs. So something that the MA Food for MA Kids Coalition will be working on, and if that's something you're interested in getting more involved in, we would love to have folks join. We have meetings monthly, including one today at 2 o'clock. So I will put in that info at the chat and encourage individuals to get involved. And as Liron mentioned, we really think this is a great complement to universal meals. So that's something the coalition supports as the Feed Kids Coalition moves that forward. That's it.
Thanks, Simca. Next up is Marty from NOFA.
Hey, folks, and thanks, Winton, and thank you all for being here. My name is Marty Dagoberto, he, him. I'm the policy director of NOFA Mass. That's the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Massachusetts. And for those who don't know, we are a statewide network of farmers, gardeners, growers, foodies, landscapers, growers, food activists that have been organizing since 1982 to increase the availability and production of nutrient-dense food coming from living soil so that we can have greater access and also to grow these foods with decreased reliance on fossil fuel inputs such as synthetic fertilizers and fossil fuel-based pesticides. And we have a slate of bills here that we wanted to bring to your attention. Very much wanting to support the Commonwealth's net neutrality, climate neutrality goals, both with supporting the Healthy Soils program. So definitely during the funding cycle, we're going to be pushing for expansion and development of the state Healthy Soils program to scale out climate smart agriculture and land management practices. And on the looking at a holistic view of how we can support the Commonwealth's goal to reduce human and environmental exposures to chemical pesticides, we're working with Rep. Minnie Dome and Senator Jason Lewis on a bill to create a pesticide reform task force, and that would take a zoomed out view of what we can do as a state to reduce our reliance on these inputs. A bill that actually passed last session on the last day of last session in both chambers, but unfortunately didn't make it to the governor's office in time to get signed, is a bill that would modernize the annual reporting process to digitize that. Currently, pesticide reporting is on analog forms that end up in a box somewhere, and this would better enable the state to track pesticide use and pursue those reduction goals. That bill also includes the school children protection bill, which we've been working on for a few years. Certainly, with attention to the PFAS issue, which I'm sure you'll hear much more about, we want to make sure that the burden of protecting our communities and families from these forever chemicals does not fall on our farming community. So providing for liability and financial protection and emergency relief fund for our farmers, for potential income replacement, et cetera, certainly with for testing. We want to make sure that the biosolids that are coming from wastewater treatment plants are tested and tracked, so we know where they're going. So that's going to be a really important bill that Senator Comerford and Rep. Schmid are sponsoring on that. And I'm sorry for the previous one. Rep. Jim Hawkins has been leading the charge on the bill to reduce use of the rodenticides, leading to the digitization bill. The raw milk delivery bill is something that we're gonna see what it can do this session. But for many years, and Winton knows well, we've been pushing to support our local farm viability and promote consumer choice and access to raw milk by providing for delivery to contracted consumers of raw milk. And so we're very much hoping that will gain some traction in this session. You can find all the details for these and many other bills on our website. I'll paste in the chat, nofamass.org/policy, and feel free to get in touch with any questions. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Marty. Massachusetts Farm Bureau, Karen Schwalbe.
Good morning. Thanks. We're starting off with something Marty went into pretty good depth on, but that is the PFAS, the forever chemical contamination. Thanks to Winton, we have a working group on that topic that has developed the legislation that Rep. Schmid and Senator Comerford put together. Forever chemicals are probably starting to pop up on everybody's radar. But for us, especially watching what happened in the state of Maine has been a struggle. With the concern being ahead of the science, decisions are made that are not always based in the most immediate or best science. And in some cases, that science doesn't exist yet. So farms have been taken out of production in Maine based on legislation that was filed primarily around biosolids application. So we are keeping a close eye on that whole topic. There was a task force that put together legislation that Rep. Hogan and Senator Sear put together, and we are neutral on that, but being very concerned about the effects that it may have on farms. There is a legislative amendment that has been refiled from the last session related to agricultural and horticultural lands, and that's around Chapter 61A and tax issues on the taxation of farmland. We prefer Rep. Schmid's bill over Comerford's just because we think that with an acreage detail that it is more likely to succeed, but both bills will get some benefits for small farmers on smaller acreage than 5 acres and give them additional protections. Some of the rest of our work is very specific to our production agriculture membership. We're looking at financial viability in the transportation of farm goods, which has to do with how farm plates are used. Sorry, I just lost my notes. And just on how farm plates are handled. The Hoisting Equipment Act is for vocational and technical schools to allow students to work under a licensed supervisor. Right now, they have to have their own provisional licenses, and the details on that are more like, yeah, you get your driver's permit, but what you really want is somebody with a driver's license. So we're working on that kind of provisional licensing at the high school level under supervision. And then for primarily Southeastern Mass, the discharge of radioactive materials has to do with the Holtec company that is managing Pilgrim Nuclear Power, and they are looking to discharge low levels of radioactive waste into Cape Cod Bay and Massachusetts Bay. And we are asking that they do not do that because there are too many unknowns with the accumulation of radioactive materials, especially with a very vibrant aquaculture and shellfish industry in that area. And the last is an act relative to horse riding instructors. Massachusetts is the only state in the United States that requires an active licensing process for horse riding instructors. And there are lots of problems with actually getting new people into that business because of the licensing requirement. So we are looking to get some relief for our equine industry on that.
Thanks, Karen. Representing the buy locals, Kelly Coleman from CISA.
Morning, I'm Kelly Coleman. I'm the Deputy Director at CISA, Community Involved in Sustaining Agriculture. And CISA is one of 9 buy local organizations across the state. And between all 9 of us, we provide support in every county. And I'm here briefly to talk about a budget line item. The buy locals have worked together for over 16 years to get and have had state support for buy local programming during that time period, which allows us to raise awareness in local communities about the importance of buying local food and connecting consumers and citizens, community members directly to farms so that they can purchase local agricultural products, access HIP with their SNAP benefits, and be advocates at the local level for farms in their community. So we'll be putting forward a budget ask this year as part of the budget cycle. Last year, the request was the successful request was $750,000, and we're looking at what's possible this year, including the option of making an ask of $1 million that would then be split out to support communities across the state. Our buy local research suggests that when community members shift money in their budget from purchasing food that's grown out of the state to purchasing food that is grown locally, just a shift of $5 towards locally grown food results in over $80 million per year redistributed in the local economy, results in 1,500 new jobs, and helps ensure that over 250 million servings of fresh and local food is available to our communities. CISA also is very supportive of many of the bills and policies that you've heard about already today, and look forward to hearing more from Winton and the coalition.
Thanks, Kelly. And next up is the collaborative, and I'll just start off by saying ditto. Man, there's a lot of good bills this session, and recognizing that the collaborative is still very much the new kid at the table, and we've learned a tremendous amount and are lucky to work with such a team of rock stars from all these different organizations. We're going to start out. Brittany's going to talk about an act to promote food literacy.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so the Act to Promote Food Literacy would help to make sure that Massachusetts K through 12 students learn about the food system in school, including topics such as nutrition, agriculture, food justice, and culinary skills. We know that food literacy is a critical life skill, but there are a lot of barriers to students having access to those lessons. It's not required. And many teachers don't have the trainings or lessons or funding for the materials. So this bill would add food literacy to the list of topics that students should learn about in school. And it would ask DESE to identify high quality lessons, provide professional development to teachers, and it would also establish a trust fund for schools to use for their food literacy programming. And now I'm going to shift to food waste. So we are also supporting an act encouraging the donation of food to persons in need. So I'm sure, as many of you know, 40% of food is wasted, and there are many people in Massachusetts who are food insecure. So food donation is one good response. Some challenges to food donation include that potential food donors, such as farms, restaurants, and grocery stores, are concerned that they'll be liable if somebody eats their donated food and gets sick. It also takes time and money to separate and properly store food for donation. So these bills would provide civil liability protection for individuals, as well as food establishments who donate food directly to consumers. And it would also enable farms that donate food to get a tax credit of up to $5,000. Thank you.
Thanks, Brittany. Norris.
Thanks, Quentin. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. Our Ag Equity Bill SD 611 HD 498 enriches the soil of Mass agricultural landscape with the vital nutrients of equity to germinate those seeds that BIPOC farmers, activists, supporting orgs, institutions like MDAR have been working towards for quite some time now. First and foremost, it creates a commission that's comprised of BIPOC farmers, leaders, and experts in ag to provide recommendations in area of policy, data collection, and resource access. And note that there's a lack of all of the previously mentioned in the realm of BIPOC farming. We believe there isn't anyone who knows more about ag equity in Mass, more so than the folks who are already engaged in farming and the farmers themselves. And it also represents a core tenet of equity stake building, which is exactly what lawmakers and overseeing agencies will be doing if this bill is passed. It's an opportunity for the state to build trust and goodwill with the BIPOC farming community. And given BIPOC farmers are only represented on 2.3% of all the Commonwealth's farm, yet make up 29% of the state's population, I'm urging everyone to support and check it out. Thanks, Whitney.
Thank you, Norris. And Becca.
Hey, y'all. I'm here to talk about an act relative to an agricultural healthy incentives program, which I think a lot of you are familiar with. This year, we have a new sponsor in the House, Rep. Mindy Dom, which we're very thankful for. This bill will enact HIP in statute and establish the framework for the program's long-term sustainability. Last session, the enabling legislation made it farther than ever before in the legislative process. It was included as a larger piece of the economic development package. Unfortunately, it didn't make it into the final language, but this is really awesome momentum that we can harness this session. Also briefly mention that we're working on our fiscal year 24 budget ask for HIP, but we will likely be asking for at least level funding of $24 million and renewing our effort to update the tech aspects of how HIP operates on the ground. So looking forward to working with you all on that, and I'll pass it back to Winton.
Thanks, Becca. And I'll touch on the rest of our bills that are on the list here. And I just put in the chat a link to our webpage where we keep track of all of the bills we're focused on. And a number of folks have talked about some of these already. The PFAS bill is obviously related to forever chemicals and supporting farmers in how they're going to have to deal with it. And this is very much evolving science and also evolving understanding. Still a lot of work being done to even understand the scope of the issue here in Massachusetts. But we felt it was important to get this bill filed to make sure that farmers are at the table and to make sure that agriculture is part of the mix in talking about dealing with this really important issue. So you can see information about that bill on the screen here, and both Karen and Marty did a great job of talking about it earlier. An act strengthening food systems is a refile of last session's omnibus agriculture bill. Some things were taken out because some things had moved to other vehicles and did pass. As it did last session, it includes sections that will establish a circuit rider position at MDAR, establish a $3 million Next Generation Farmers Fund to provide education grants for new and beginning farmers. And will direct the Mass Emergency Management Agency to incorporate food production into disaster planning, not just food distribution. There's a couple of new sections to the bill this session, one that would allow MDAR to buy and hold land, which would give it an important new tool to protect farmland. Right now, MDAR is interestingly one of the only agencies that does not have statutory authority to purchase and hold land. And then another new section that would establish a state staff position to help coordinate food system policy and programs among the many agencies that interact with the food system. The next bill and act supporting the Commonwealth's food system is simply that last section that I just mentioned. It's only introduced in the House this session, but it would establish a food system coordinator as I described in the previous bill. And then Karen talked about the proposal for it's called Proposal for a Legislative Amendment to the Constitution, because this would actually be changing the Massachusetts Constitution. And the Article 99 of the Constitution is what gives the legislature the authority to basically change taxation for farmers. And it was written at a time where it made sense to say that farms are 5 acres or more, and that doesn't make sense anymore. Management practices have changed. Many farms are smaller than 5 acres. Land has been carved up because of development over the years, and so many farmers have multiple parcels, and many of them are small. And the reality is Massachusetts has some of the most expensive farmland in the country. So this is an equity issue because low-income, beginning BIPOC farmers often simply can't afford to buy the larger parcels of land, and so they can't benefit from these programs that are really supposed to be benefiting all of Massachusetts agriculture. I will add on this, constitutional amendments take a long time. They have to pass through 2 constitutional conventions, which means this session and the next session. So the soonest it would make it out of the legislature would be 4 years from now, and that's if everything goes smoothly, and then has to be brought to a public vote at polling places during a regular election. So we're in this one for the long slog. It was filed last session and didn't make it through the Constitutional Convention. It wasn't introduced in the Senate last session, though, and since there's 2 vehicles to move it forward this session, we're quite hopeful about it. So that's it for the collaborative's priorities. And we've got a few minutes left, so I want to open it up to questions and answers for us or any of the presenters. Pat Baker unfortunately had to duck out, but if anyone has questions, you can raise your hand. Tony, you're raising your hand old school way, since we can only see one screen at a time. And we've got 100 people on the call, use the function so you pop up. But Tony, I saw you first. What's up? You're on mute.
Thank you, Quentin, for this opportunity. I just want to let these people know that Senator Kennedy and I just submitted a bill. We have a docket number 2111. It is a resolve for a climate change staffing study. What I've realized as a select board member in Pepperell and as the chair of an NC4 regional climate change group is that our regional planning agencies are understaffed to deliver on the climate change plan described by the Department of Energy and Environment. There's a common recognition that this is a huge problem, and it's relative to our farm community because there's a lot of programming targeting food security issues and soils as a carbon sink opportunity for addressing climate change. So I would welcome any support on this bill going forward because it's going to be huge in terms of accessing the billions of dollars being targeted for climate change work.
Thanks, Tony. Linda, your hand is up.
Yeah, hi, I'm Linda Hanson from Arlington. Question for Liron about universal school meals. Curious about the difference between, kind of fighting to pass another 1-year extension versus the permanent change, and just kind of what your thoughts are on how advocates can best support that particular bill. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So as I mentioned, we are going both vehicles for that. The biggest reason is that just the way the legislature moves, it seems very unlikely that they're going to go through the whole process and pass a bill before June or July. And we want to make sure that there's no gap in this program, but we don't have next school year be a gap, even if we do ultimately pass the bill. And we're optimistic about passing the bill. So making sure that we don't have that gap is why we're putting in the budget. Once that passes in July, we're going to make a hard pivot as a coalition and make the case even stronger for why we need this permanent. But we just don't want to see any sort of gap. And I would say as advocates, I do think there's quite an advantage of having another 1-year extension because that's yet another year that this has been a program that's actually functioning in schools, and a second year that the state is saying that they will pick up the costs for that program. So it makes it all that much harder for when we're advocating for the bill to say, oh, we can't afford this or we're not going to do this. It's like, well, you have twice now. So I very much want to see the bill and not have to keep going year after year. But we do think that passing it this year for the budget is great for a number of different reasons. Does that answer your question? Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liron. Any other questions? There was a question about budget priorities and timing of those. And I'll say that, folks at community-based organizations or other groups, this is a good time to be thinking about budget priorities, and definitely reach out to the collaborative or any of the other organizations that you're particularly aligned with to start building those ideas for amendments and